phone away for a moment. Look at me. Don't look at the news tonight. The news is just the weather. It is noisy, it is temporary, and it is designed to keep you staring up at the clouds while someone quietly, expertly reaches into your pocket from behind. Tonight, we aren't looking at the clouds. Tonight, we are looking at the soil. We are looking at the foundation, the deep, invisible, load-bearing architecture of how the world actually runs. Not how they teach you it runs in the textbooks. Not how the anchor explains it on the evening broadcast. How it actually runs, underneath, where the real weight is carried. Let me ask you something simple. What do you think you are working so hard for? You get up before the sun is fully awake. You trade your energy, your focus, your patience, your creativity, your health, your time, the irreplaceable, non-renewable hours of your one and only life. And in exchange, you receive pieces of green paper, or more likely these days, a digital number that changes on a banking app every 2 weeks. You look at that number on the screen and you feel something, security maybe, or the beginning of it, the sense that the effort was real because the reward is real. But I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to find a bill in your wallet, a 20, a 10, whatever you have, and I want you to read the line printed across the very top of it. It says Federal Reserve Note. Now, in the world of law and finance, in the precise technical language of contracts and obligations, do you know what a note is? A note is an IOU. A note is a promise to pay a debt that has not yet been settled. It is an acknowledgement of an obligation, not the fulfillment of one, which means the thing in your hand, the thing you worked 40 hours this week to acquire, the thing you believe represents your effort, your time, your contribution to the world, is not wealth. It is a receipt for a debt, a claim on a promise, a ghost wearing the clothes of value. Now it works. I am not dismissing the practical reality. You can buy your groceries with it. You can fill your gas tank. The whole magnificent, humming machinery of American commerce accepts it without question. It works because we all agree to believe in it, because the belief is universal and simultaneous. The illusion holds. But the secret that sits at the very bottom of the ledger, the secret that the most expensive schools in this country will take your tuition money and still never teach you, is this: the currency you are exhausting your life to accumulate was not mined from the earth, was not grown from a field, was not built by a craftsman's hands, was not created by any act of human effort or ingenuity or sacrifice. It was summoned out of absolute nothingness, out of thin air. And tonight, I am going to show you exactly how that summoning is done. Because once you see the trick, once you truly, structurally understand the mechanics of the illusion, the magic show is over. And you can begin to make choices that the people running the show are very much hoping you will never be equipped to make. To understand how the modern magicians pull the rabbit from the hat, you have to go back, not to last decade, not to 2008, not even to 1971, though we will get there. You have to go back hundreds of years to a time before central banks and digital ledgers and Federal Reserve press conferences. Back to when money was simple. Back to when money was honest, in the way that only things which are genuinely difficult to produce can be honest. Money was gold. Gold is heavy. Gold is scarce. Gold does not grow from seeds or flow from rivers in useful quantities. To produce an ounce of gold, a human being had to break their back in a dark, dangerous shaft beneath the earth, breathing bad air, swinging a heavy tool. For months of their life, an ounce of gold represented real human energy, real human time, real human cost. It had what we call intrinsic value, not because anyone decided it did, but because the effort required to produce it was undeniably real. But gold is heavy. Gold is inconvenient. Gold is dangerous to carry on the road between towns, if every thief between here and the market knows what a full coin purse sounds like. So the merchants, the people who needed to move value across distances, went to the goldsmith. The goldsmith was the man in every town with the heaviest vault, the thickest doors, and the most reliable guards. You brought him your gold. You gave it into his keeping. And in return, he gave you a piece of paper, a receipt, that said in formal, legally binding language, the bearer of this document may present it at any time and receive, in return, the gold deposited herein simple, practical, elegant. And soon something interesting happened. The merchants realized they did not need to make the journey back to the goldsmith's vault every time they wanted to complete a transaction. If I owed you the value of 10 gold coins for a shipment of cloth, I did not need to go to the vault, collect the coins, carry them across town, and hand them to you. I could simply hand you the receipt. You knew it was good. You knew the goldsmith's vault stood behind it. You took the paper and trusted it. The receipts became the currency. The paper began to circulate as money, and the goldsmith watched this happen from behind his heavy door. He was a clever man, the goldsmith. He watched his vault every day. He noticed something. People came and went. Deposits were made. Receipts were issued. Transactions occurred. Commerce hummed along. But only about 10% of the people ever came to the vault at the same time to claim their actual physical gold. The other 90%, their gold just sat there, in the dark behind the heavy door, gathering dust, doing nothing. And that is when the alchemist's itch took hold of him. He sat in his counting room one evening and he had a thought. A quiet, dangerous, history-altering thought. He thought, all this gold is sitting here. Nobody is using it. Nobody is checking on it. Nobody comes to verify the inventory. What if I wrote extra receipts? What if I issued paper claims on gold that isn't there to people who need to borrow money and charge them interest on it? He could lend out paper, charge real interest, and as long as the depositors didn't all show up on the same day asking for their gold, he would never be found out. He began to do exactly that. He issued multiple claims on the same ounce of gold. He lent receipts to people whose gold he did not hold, and he collected interest on those loans. Real interest, paid in real coin, earned on money that existed nowhere except on a piece of paper he had written himself. He became extraordinarily wealthy, not by working harder, not by producing anything, not by contributing any value to the world, but by creating paper claims on a reality that did not exist and charging the full price of reality for the privilege of holding them. In the old days, in the days when communities were small enough that everyone knew where the vault was and who held the key, when the townspeople discovered what the goldsmith had done, they did not hold a committee meeting. They did not file a regulatory complaint. They ran to the vault, found the gold was not there, and they called it what it was. Fraud, they called it a bank run. And if the goldsmith was unlucky, they called it something worse than fraud. But today, we do not hang the goldsmith. Today, we give him a title. We give him a mahogany office on a high floor in a tall building with his name on the lobby wall. We invite him to testify before Congress, and the Congress takes notes. We put his photograph in financial publications and call him a steward of the economy. So today, we call him the chairman of the Federal Reserve. And we took the goldsmith's localized village crime, codified it into federal law, wrapped it in the language of monetary policy and macroeconomic stability, and turned it into the operating system of the most powerful financial empire in the history of human civilization. A system this large, a deception this total, cannot be run by one man in one village. It required a syndicate. It required the specific, coordinated cooperation of the most powerful private financial interests in the country. And it required them to operate in a secrecy so complete that even the name of what they were creating had to be carefully, deliberately chosen to obscure its true nature. In November of 1910, a private railway car departed from a station in New Jersey. The windows were completely frosted over. No one on the platform could see inside, and the men inside could not be seen. The passengers were instructed before boarding to use only their first names for the duration of the journey. They were to tell anyone who asked that they were going on a duck hunting trip to the Georgia coast. They were not going duck hunting. The men in that car were the private representatives of the Rockefeller family, the Morgan banking interests, and the Rothschild financial network. Between them, they represented, by the estimates of historians who later reconstructed the gathering, approximately 1/4 of the entire accumulated wealth of the planet. They were going to a secluded barrier island off the coast of Georgia, an island accessible only by private boat. An island whose permanent residents had signed agreements not to disclose what occurred there. The island was called Jekyll Island. And over the course of 9 days, in a private clubhouse, in rooms that were swept for listening devices, and guarded by men who had been specifically selected for their discretion. These representatives of the world's most powerful private banking interests drafted the legislation that would become the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. They did not call it the Bankers Central Control Act. They did not call it the Private Currency Monopoly Bill. They knew, because these were sophisticated men who understood the psychology of democratic populations, that the American people had a deep, historically rooted, constitutionally grounded suspicion of centralized banking power. The country had fought to eliminate central banks twice before. Presidents had staked their political lives on opposing them, so they chose the name with extraordinary care. The Federal Reserve, federal. It sounds governmental, official, constitutional, like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the federal courts, or the federal army. It sounds like a public institution, accountable to the people, operating in the national interest. Reserve. It sounds conservative, prudent, like there is something solid behind it, something held in reserve, something waiting dependably to back up its obligations. The Federal Reserve. It is one of the most successful acts of naming in the history of institutional deception, because the Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express. It is not a government agency. It is not accountable to Congress in any meaningful operational sense. It is a private corporation owned by and operated for the benefit of its member commercial banks that was granted by an act of Congress the exclusive, monopolistic authority to issue the national currency of the United States of America. They went to Congress and made their case. They said, "Give us control of the money supply, and we will end the cycle of financial panics that periodically convulsed the American economy. We will smooth the boom and bust. We will provide stability. We will be the adult in the room when the markets lose their nerve. Give us the keys to the mint, and we will keep the engine running smoothly." It was the greatest sales pitch in American financial history. Congress gave them the keys. And since 1913, since the moment that private cartel received the legal authority to create and manage the American money supply, the purchasing power of the United States dollar has fallen by more than 96 cents of every dollar it started with. More than a century of stewardship, more than a century of stability, and the dollar is worth 4 cents of what it was when they took over. I will let you decide whether the sales pitch was honest. Now let me show you the mechanism. The actual step-by-step here is how it works, machinery of money creation in the modern American banking system. Because most people, intelligent, educated, hardworking, thoughtful people, carry a mental picture of how this works that is almost entirely wrong. And the gap between the picture in their head and the reality in the ledger is precisely the space in which their financial futures are quietly consumed. The picture most people carry goes something like this. Banks take in deposits from savers, and they lend those deposits out to borrowers. You put $1,000 in your savings account. Mrs. Johnson down the street needs a car loan. The bank, acting as an intermediary, takes your $1,000 and lends it to Mrs. Johnson. She pays it back with interest. The bank keeps a small cut. You earn a small return. Everybody participates in a rational, circular, value-producing exchange. That picture is a fairy tale. It bears approximately the same relationship to the actual mechanics of banking as a children's drawing of an airplane bears to the engineering specifications of a 747. Here is what actually happens. When you walk into a bank and apply for a loan, a car loan, a student loan, a mortgage, a business line of credit, the bank does not go into a vault and retrieve the money of other depositors. It does not transfer funds from one account to another. It does not pull anything from anywhere. The loan officer sits at a computer terminal, opens your account file, and types a number. That is it. The number did not exist before the loan officer typed it. There was no money sitting in a room somewhere waiting to be assigned to you. There was no prior active production or saving or value creation that preceded the appearance of that number in your account. The money was created, summoned from absolute numerical nothingness. At the precise moment the key was struck and the entry was saved. The act of you signing a loan document, the act of you formally committing to debt, is what creates the money. The debt creates the money. The money does not pre-exist the debt. I want you to sit with that for a moment because the mind tends to slide off it the first time. It sounds too strange, too simple, too much like the kind of thing someone says before they try to sell you something. But I am not selling you anything. I am showing you a publicly documented, academically established, central bank acknowledged reality of modern monetary mechanics. The Bank of England, one of the oldest and most respected central banks in the world, published a paper in 2014 explicitly confirming this. They wrote, in clear language, that the majority of money in the modern economy is created not by the central bank printing physical notes, but by commercial banks making loans. Deposits do not create loans. Loans create deposits. The money is made when the debt is signed. Now, the next layer, what happens when you take that loan and deposit the proceeds, or when the money circulates and eventually lands in another bank account? This is where the goldsmith's ancient trick receives its modern, mathematical, institutionally sanctioned upgrade. It is called fractional reserve banking. Under this system, banks are required to hold only a fraction of their deposits in reserve, available to be withdrawn by depositors on demand. The rest, the vast majority, can be lent out. For much of American banking history, the reserve requirement was approximately 10%. I will use that number to show you the mathematics, because the mathematics are what make the jaw drop. You deposit $1,000 into your bank. The bank is required to hold $100 in reserve. The remaining $900 it lends out to a borrower. Let's call him Michael. Michael takes that $900 and spends it, pays a contractor, buys equipment, whatever his loan was for. The contractor deposits that $900 into his bank. His bank holds $90 in reserve and lends out $810 to another borrower. That $810 is spent, deposited in another bank, which holds $81 and lends out $729. And so the cascade continues, down and down and down, each deposit spawning a new loan, each loan becoming a new deposit, each deposit reduced by 10% and pushed forward into the next iteration of the cycle. At the end of this mathematical cascade, your original $1,000 of deposited money has generated, through the sequential alchemy of fractional lending, nearly $10,000 of money circulating in the banking system. $10,000 from 1,000. And here is the detail that turns a stomach. When you hold it clearly in your mind, you still think you have your $1,000. It is right there on your app. Your balance reads $1,000. The contractor thinks he has $900. The second depositor thinks he has $810. If you add up what all those people believe they possess, the total is nearly $10,000. But the actual, physical, foundational money at the base of all of it is your original $1,000. The other $9,000 exists only as digital ledger entries, as numbers on screens, as the shared, simultaneous, mutually reinforcing belief of a chain of depositors who have never been in the same room, none of whom know what the others were told, and all of whom would find the doors locked if they tried to claim their money on the same afternoon. And on all $10,000 of this digital architecture, on the $9,000 that exist only as entries in a computer system, the bank is collecting interest, real interest, paid in real money, earned on nothing. The goldsmith did not die. He just moved to a taller building and hired a better accountant. Listen to that clock. Most people look for a thief who wears a mask, carries a weapon, and breaks through a door they can point to afterward. A thief who leaves evidence of his entry. A thief whose crime can be named, dated, and reported. The greatest theft in the history of American financial life does not work that way. It works like a clock. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Persistent, quiet, perfectly mechanically regular, present in every room of every house in the country, noticed by almost no one, contested by no one, so familiar as to be invisible. When the banks create money through lending, when they type 10,000 into being from 1,000 of deposits, they release that new money into an economy where a fixed number of goods and services exist. More dollars chasing the same number of houses, groceries, medical appointments, and automobiles. What happens to prices when the number of dollars grows faster than the number of things those dollars can buy? The prices rise. We call it inflation. We talk about it as though it is a weather event, a cold front, a seasonal phenomenon, an external force that arrives and departs on its own mysterious schedule. But inflation of this kind, inflation caused by the expansion of the money supply beyond the growth of real productive output, is not weather, it is arithmetic. More dollars, same goods. Each dollar buys less. The purchasing power of the dollars you worked for, saved carefully, and stored responsibly, quietly, invisibly, without announcement or apology, decreases, not dramatically, not in a way that triggers alarm on any given Tuesday, just steadily, persistently, every month, in every year, in every decade, grinding forward like a glacier, too slow to watch, in real time, catastrophic in its cumulative effect. In 1950, a man earning a modest blue-collar wage could support a family of 5, own a home, and put his children through school without going into debt to do any of it. Today, 2 adults with college degrees and full-time professional employment struggle to afford a 2-bedroom rental in a mid-sized city. They look at homeownership the way their grandparents looked at European travel, as a beautiful thing that other people get to do. The work did not get harder. The people did not get lazier or less intelligent or less deserving. What changed was the instrument they are paid in. What changed was its purchasing power, quietly, reliably, year after year, ground down by the same monetary expansion that allowed the banking system to grow its balance sheet and the government to finance its spending without the political inconvenience of raising taxes. I call it the Chronovore, the time eater, because what inflation steals from you is not ultimately money. What inflation steals from you is time. Every dollar in your pocket represents a portion of your life, a specific number of hours traded for a specific reward. When that reward shrinks, when the purchasing power of the dollar erodes between the moment you earn it and the moment you spend it, it is not numbers that have been taken from you. It is hours. It is mornings. It is years. The Chronovore does not need to break into your house. It does not need to touch your wallet or access your accounts. It simply waits patiently, invisibly, in every dollar you hold, feeding on the gap between what that dollar was worth when you earned it and what it is worth when you finally spend it. Tick, tock, tock. And here is where it becomes something more than unfair. Here is where it becomes, and I want you to hear this word carefully, because I do not use it lightly, cruel. When the banking system creates money through loans, it creates the principal, the amount borrowed, the number typed into your account when you sign. It does not create the interest. Think about what that means. If every dollar in the entire American economy was borrowed into existence from the banking system, if the total money supply is, as it functionally is, the sum of all outstanding loans, then the money to pay the interest on those loans does not exist anywhere in the system. The banks lent $100 into existence. They demand 110 back, but there is only 100 in the world, the $10 that represent the interest. The $10 that must be paid or the loan goes into default can only come from one place. It can only come from someone else's principal, from the money that was created by someone else's debt, borrowed for someone else's purpose, representing someone else's obligation. To pay your interest, someone else must fail to pay theirs. This is not a flaw in the system. This is the system, a mathematically guaranteed, structurally necessary, built into the foundation reality for the interest obligations of this monetary architecture to be met in aggregate. There must always be, at the bottom of the pile, a layer of default, a layer of bankruptcy, a layer of people who ran the race as hard as they could and still arrived at the finish line without enough, not because they were weak or foolish or undisciplined, because the mathematics required someone to come up short. Because the game was designed so that the total obligations always exceed the total available money by exactly the amount of accumulated interest, and someone somewhere has to absorb that gap with their failure. This is why our society feels the way it feels. This is why, despite unprecedented productivity and technological capability, Despite the fact that we produce more goods and services per person than at any point in human history, there is a persistent, grinding background anxiety running through the American middle class that no amount of economic growth ever quite resolves, because the growth does not resolve it. The growth cannot resolve it. The system is not designed to resolve it. The system is designed to perpetuate it. We are all carrying buckets with holes in the bottom, running across a desert, trying to reach a destination that is being moved further away at exactly the rate we are running toward it. And while we run, while we work our second jobs and skip our vacations and deny our children things we wish we could give them, and lie awake at 3 in the morning doing arithmetic that never quite comes out even, the men who poke the holes in the buckets are sitting in climate-controlled offices, collecting the water. I do not tell you this to make your heart heavy. I want to be very clear about that. I tell you this because a man who does not know where the trap is will step in it every time. But a man who has studied the trap, who knows exactly where it is set, how it is triggered, and what it is designed to catch, that man can walk through the same forest and come out the other side with his leg intact. The ledger has two sides. There is the left side, the side of the serf, the man who trades his finite, sacred, irreplaceable time for infinite digital ink, who stores his life's effort in a currency that is systematically, intentionally, mathematically designed to be worth less tomorrow than it is today, who does everything the guidance counselors told him to do and arrives at 65 with numbers on a screen that represent less real purchasing power than his father had when he was 40. And there is the right side, the side of the sovereign. The architect, the person who looked at the machine, understood what it was designed to do, and made the quiet, disciplined, unglamorous decision to stop being the yield and start being the owner. If the money is fake, if it is being created from nothing and systematically diluted, then the only rational response is to use it as quickly and strategically as you can to acquire things that are real. This is not a secret strategy. It is not insider knowledge. It is, in fact, exactly what the people who built the system have been doing with their own money for generations, while publicly encouraging everyone else to save their dollars in low-interest accounts and trust the process. The elite print the paper so they can buy the earth. They use the Federal Reserve's thin-air currency to acquire agricultural land, commercial real estate, productive businesses, physical precious metals held outside the banking system, and any other finite, real, tangible asset whose supply cannot be expanded by clicking a mouse. They use the illusion to secure the reality. And your task, whether you are starting with $500 or $5,000 or $50,000, is to learn to think the same way, operate the same way, and make the same fundamental distinction that separates every person who has ever built lasting, generational, inflation-resistant wealth from every person who worked just as hard and ended up with nothing solid to show for it. The distinction is this: do you own things or do you hold paper? Your first and most urgent mission, if you carry any high-interest debt, is to pay it off. Every dollar of credit card debt you carry is a dollar that is being consumed at 15, 20, 25% per year by the very system we have been discussing tonight. There is no investment on earth that reliably returns 25% annually. Eliminating that debt is the highest guaranteed financial return available to any person in any market condition. It is the foundation. You cannot build a fortress on sand, and you cannot build financial sovereignty while you are actively paying tribute to the system you are trying to escape. Your second mission is to invest in yourself, in your actual, real, market-tested human capabilities, with a seriousness and a commitment that the credential industry has spent decades trying to convince you can be substituted by a diploma and a loan. They can print $1 trillion tomorrow morning. They cannot print a master builder. They cannot print a skilled surgeon, an inventive engineer, a data analyst who has spent 10,000 hours developing genuine expertise, a solopreneur who knows how to identify a real problem and build a real solution for it. They cannot print judgment. They cannot print experience. They cannot print the specific, hard-won, in-demand capability that makes a human being genuinely irreplaceable in their particular corner of the world. If you possess that, if you develop that deliberately and seriously, the world will give you whatever currency exists to have your help. Your human capital is the only asset that inflation absolutely cannot touch because it is not denominated in dollars. It is denominated in value, and value does not debase. Your third mission is to begin, however slowly and however modestly, to move your stored wealth out of paper and into things with fixed, finite, real-world supply. Land structures. Precious metals held physically outside the banking system. Productive assets that generate income in a way that naturally adjusts for inflation, because their output is priced in the real world, not locked into a fixed numerical contract. When the tide of thin air money rises, and it will always rise because the system requires it to rise, you do not want to be standing on the shore, watching the water come up around your knees while your savings dissolve. You want to be in the boat. You want to be the person whose assets are rising with the tide, whose income is adjusting with the market, whose net worth is measured in things that cannot be conjured from a keyboard. Own the thing, not the paper. Once you see the trick, once you truly, structurally, bone level understand how the money is made, who makes it, who benefits from it first, and who absorbs the cost of it last, the magic show is over. You cannot unsee it. You cannot go back to looking at a Federal Reserve note and seeing simply money. You will always see underneath it the goldsmith's receipt, the ledger entry, the debt that called it into being, the purchasing power that will be quietly harvested from it between now and whenever you spend it. And that seeing, that clarity, changes everything, not loudly, not dramatically. You will not stand up from wherever you are sitting right now and march into the streets, or overturn anything, or make any grand gesture of defiance. You will simply make different choices, quieter choices, less glamorous choices. Choices that do not make anyone in the financial services industry particularly happy and do not generate exciting content for the people who profit from your financial anxiety and confusion. You will stop being a consumer and start being an owner. You will stop measuring your progress by the number on the screen and start measuring it by the real, tangible, finite things you have translated that number into. You will stop fighting for your seat at a table that was built to extract from everyone seated at it. And you will start, slowly and deliberately, building a table of your own. The world will try to pull you back to the treadmill tomorrow morning. It will offer you easy credit and low monthly payments and the seductive comfort of buying things that feel like wealth without being wealth. It will tell you that a little debt is healthy, that inflation is normal, that the experts have everything under control, that the number on your screen is a fair representation of the value of your effort. You will smile, because you will know what a note is. You will know who the goldsmith became. You will know what is and is not in the vault. And you will know that the most important ledger is not the one the bank keeps on you. It is the one you keep for yourself. Keep your eyes open.